Greetings, friends. The saga of the so-called Russian-Ukrainian negotiations in Istanbul continues. Why do I say so-called? Because the Russians are simply pretending to negotiate, and on the 2nd of June they're going to send some more nobodies to Istanbul again.
Our delegation, as well as the Russian delegation of negotiators, is heading to Istanbul.
The complete composition of the Russian delegation was also officially announced to the public. It's the same lineup of the Russian delegation.
Ukraine wasn't really eager to send its delegation to Istanbul this time because the Russians are just stalling for time. At the previous negotiations, it was agreed that there would be a Russian memorandum and a Ukrainian memorandum on a ceasefire and on further settlement of the Russian-Ukrainian war. So Ukraine has presented its memorandum, but the Russians still haven't shown theirs. Nevertheless, the United States still put pressure on Ukraine. Trump pressured Zelensky to send a delegation, so the Ukrainian representatives will also have to fly to Istanbul, even though the Americans themselves admit that these negotiations are pointless.
I think Monday will be yet another example of a Russian charade, a pointless meeting.
Because that's exactly what it is. It's a pointless meeting. There would only be a point if they agree on another prisoner exchange. Meanwhile, the President of the United States, Trump, is deeply shocked. He is shocked by how Vladimir Putin orders strikes on Ukraine.
I saw many things that truly and profoundly surprised me. Missiles were striking cities like Kyiv during ongoing negotiations that, as I personally felt, might have been very, very close to their ultimate and final completion or even their resolution.
In almost just 24 hours, Trump had nearly ended the Russia-Ukraine war, and then Vladimir Putin disappointed him.
We were about to solve the problem, and suddenly missiles were launched at several cities and people died. I saw things that surprised me, and I don't like being surprised.
In recent weeks, Trump has been expressing his dissatisfaction with Vladimir Putin more and more often. But the problem is that after that, at most, he just acts surprised like he just did now. And aside from his surprise, there's nothing else. And you, friends, shouldn't relax either, because yesterday Trump also took a shot at Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
You and your dedicated team are currently dealing with a very stubborn and unyielding Vladimir Putin.
And Zelensky, he's very stubborn, and so is Zelensky.
But in a different way.
Today we'll discuss the document that the Russians are going to present on Monday in Istanbul, but first I need to remind you about donating to the current anti-Russian effort. Right now we have almost 100 requests from different units and everyone needs help. No one should be left without crucial support. So go ahead and donate. All the details are as always in the description of this video. And if you still haven't subscribed to my channel, don't do that. Subscribe now. Probably for the first time in the history of world wars, we can witness something like this. The so-called Russian Federation is waging war against Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting, not surrendering, but the United States of America is already ready to capitulate even before the negotiations have reached their final stage. Trump's special representative, Keith Kellogg, stated that America is ready to make concessions to the so-called Russia regarding Ukraine not joining NATO.
Is President Trump ready to make such commitments to Putin that NATO will not expand?
I think this is a legitimate concern, and we have discussed it repeatedly. As we have already said, for us, Ukraine's accession to NATO is not up for discussion.
You know, all my life I thought that the United States of America was the leading country in the alliance in NATO. But it turns out that it is the so-called Russian Federation that controls NATO, because America is also ready to impose a ban on Moldova and Georgia joining NATO.
And this is one of the issues that Russia is raising. And they are not only talking to Ukraine, they're talking to Georgia, they're talking to Moldova. They are obviously talking to Ukraine. We are talking thoroughly and comprehensively. You know, we can stop NATO expansion at your border.
Thus, we can observe how Trump, while promising to make America great again, is actually making it small, I'd even say petty, because petty people have come to power, because American politics is being run by utter, complete madness. But not all is lost. Yesterday, U.S. Senators Lindsey Graham, a Republican, and Richard Blumenthal arrived in Kyiv. He represents the Democratic Party. They came to, once again, you won't believe it, promise large-scale sanctions against so-called Russia.
We have 82 U.S. senators who are co-authors of legislation that imposes devastating sanctions not only against Russia, but also against those countries that purchase Russian oil, gas, uranium, and other products.
A 500% tariff on anyone who buys its oil, gas, or petrochemical products.
American senators are much more irritated by Vladimir Putin and the so-called Russian Federation than by Trump. In recent weeks, they have been very vocal about being ready, if necessary, to independently vote for a new package of sanctions against the so-called Russia and for secondary sanctions against countries that buy Russian oil. But still, for now, the key word belongs to Trump, and Trump doesn't know the word.
Mr. President, do you support the bill by Lindsey Graham and Blumenthal, which provides for imposing sanctions against Russia?
I don't know. I need to see it. I'll take a look.
Maybe in a week or maybe in two, Trump will finally decide whether he wants to impose sanctions against the so-called Russia. Or maybe in 2 weeks he'll say he needs another 2 weeks, and then more and more. We've already been through this together. Let's better talk about what kind of nonsense the Russians will be offering in Istanbul this Monday. Nebenzya has already revealed some preliminary details. They will demand that Ukraine halt all mobilization and that our partners stop supplying weapons.
For the duration of the ceasefire, at the very least, Western countries must stop supplying weapons to the Kyiv regime and Ukraine must halt mobilization.
America is really hoping for what they call a ceasefire and for the Russian-Ukrainian war to be frozen. Our European partners are hoping for this as well. Perhaps some Ukrainians and some Ukrainian politicians are also hoping for this. But the so-called Russian Federation will not allow the Russian-Ukrainian war to be frozen. The Russians are deliberately putting forward absurd demands so that no one will agree to them. Let me remind you that they are also demanding that Ukraine withdraw its troops from its own territory.
Our position is constructive, it is open, and it has been stated directly.
This Monday, the Russians will officially present their so-called memorandum to Ukraine, which is in fact an ultimatum. And if Ukraine does not agree to capitulate, the Russians will demand capitulation from Ukraine and puff themselves up, claiming they are ready to take Odessa, Mykolaiv, and our entire country in 2 or 3 days.
If they don't want to, they'll get it all. And they'll be left without Zaporizhia, without Dnipropetrovsk, without Sumy, without Kharkiv, and without Odessa and Mykolaiv.
If necessary, we will fight for this as long as it takes.
Well, I don't know, friends. Maybe Nebenzya will be able to keep fighting as long as so-called Russia needs. But as for the Russian army, to be honest, I'm not so sure about that. No, of course, our enemy continues to advance and has tactical successes, but the degradation of the Russian army is becoming increasingly obvious.
Come on, stand next to him, go.
Why didn't you sit down? Nebenzya and Medinsky will be the ones to fight forever with their tongues. But ordinary Russians will once again have to go on the assault on crutches or drive there in a Zhiguli.
I'm about to send the assault. I can't walk, so I'm getting into the buggy.
Although the so-called Russian Federation will still bring us a lot more trouble and sorrow, and although the Russians may still capture some of our territories, I'm convinced that they overestimate themselves and underestimate Ukrainian drones and the Ukrainian people. By the way, thanks to the constant work of Ukrainian drones, Russian logistics are sometimes so disrupted that they are forced to drink water from puddles.
Well, here we are, drinking this kind of water.
That's really awesome.
Look, check out our fantastic conditions here. Look, there's refreshing Coca-Cola, various sodas, and all that wonderful stuff available.
You know, it seems to me that this is a kind of dehumanization. You shouldn't laugh at the fact that Russians are forced to drink water from puddles. You can laugh when they don't get any water at all. And to make that happen, thanks to you, our soldiers have received another 428 new FPVs, including through the Redron State Drone Conversion Program.
Wishing you good health, the Voron Unmanned Systems Battalion of the 100th Separate Mechanized Brigade would like to express sincere gratitude to the Sternenko community for providing FPV drones. We feel your support not only through the equipment, but also through your faith in the armed forces of Ukraine and in Ukraine itself. Only together can we bring victory closer. Glory to Ukraine.
Wishing you good health. We, the soldiers of the 128th Separate Mountain Assault Brigade, Battalion of Unmanned Systems, would like to thank Mr. Sternenko and all his benefactors for providing a batch of 50 drones to help us successfully destroy the enemy. Forward to victory. Glory to Ukraine.
The 68th Separate Mountain Brigade thanks the charitable foundation Sternenko community for providing 100 FPV drones. Together we are bringing our victory closer. Glory to Ukraine.
Wishing you good health. We, the soldiers of the Unmanned Aerial Systems Platoon, are carrying out combat missions in the Pokrovsk direction. We express our gratitude to the Sternenko community for providing FPV drones to destroy the enemy. The situation at the front is very difficult, and that is exactly why it requires your maximum support.
We thank the Sternenko community and Mr. Sternenko personally for providing us with 50 excellent drones, which will help us destroy the enemy in the Donetsk direction. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to heroes.
Wishing you good health. The 35th Separate Marine Brigade is on the line. We express our gratitude to the Sternenko community and the Red Run Project for their support. With your help, we will destroy even more enemies. Together to victory. Glory to Ukraine.
I wish you strong health. On behalf of the Hunters Strike Group of the 44th Artillery Brigade, I want to thank the Red Run Company and the Sternenko Community Charitable Foundation for the upgraded drones for carrying out special missions. Thanks to this, we will be able to surprise the occupiers where they least expect it. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes. Friends, I won't be making any geopolitical predictions. That's a very thankless task right now, but I do know what we can do here and now. We can help our military with new FPVs, so keep supporting the security and defense forces of Ukraine.